All right, everyone. Happy Friday. I am here. I just got off the phone with my father. Shout out to my father. My intention, our dad used to say that a lot. My intention was to start the stream promptly at 11, maybe a little bit before, but my computer here wanted to update. So I decided, okay, well, and I pondered, okay, if I try to do the stream and the computer wants to update, usually when it does that, the functions slow down and the functions are delayed. So I might as well allow it to update. It's been updating pretty quickly lately, so I should be able to update it. I should be able to allow the computer to update itself without losing time. But this time it updated and then it wanted to do the cleanup thing, which took about 20 minutes. So that's why I'm here. So I don't want to spend a lot of time on this stream. I wanted to get out and move a little bit and work out a little bit during my lunchtime hour. So let's see if I can get in and out. So who is here? Man of tomorrow. Man of tomorrow. Your reputation precedes you. You know. Uh, It looks like you you know what? I'm gonna leave that. I'm gonna leave that. I hope to stay in your good graces myself. All right. Let me man of tomorrow can see me. Let me make sure I can if man of tomorrow can see me, that means I am live. Okay. Man of tomorrow, you're the only one here so far. Please smash that like button, man. Help a brother out. Help me out. Smash that like button. All right. I'm gonna play my intro. And then I will jump in and then we'll talk about whether or not men have a biological reproductive clock and what that means. So I'm going to share this on my original channel as well. This is an interesting topic. Months ago, I didn't expect to do this one, but I did create a live stream on freezing eggs because that's a novel topic. That's something people are talking about. And I thought it would be fun to present the science of it and what it is and how much it costs. But someone in the Facebook sphere, some call it fake book, someone said, well, men got to worry about freezing sperm just like women have to worry about freezing eggs. So I said, okay, I never thought of that. And she shared an article with me, the article that I'm going to present here. And so that's where this came from. So I thought in my list of potential topics, I thought it would be fun to address this because it's not talked about often. I'd never heard about men freezing sperm. So I'm going to play my intro and then I'll see you on the other side, man. Tomorrow, if you're still here, uh, hopefully you find this interesting and whoever else joins us, joins us. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Big Discussions 76, Science and Technology. Over here, I talk about science and technology. YouTubing is not easy. It's a sweet science, like boxing. A little bit of Floyd Mayweather, a little bit of Muhammad Ali, a little bit of Oscar De La Hoya, a little bit of Canelo Alvarez. It's a sweet science. People on the viewer side don't always understand what's going on or why. And it's not easy. And so people some people look at topics like this and say, why is Dr. Dunbar covering this? Why is Dr. Dunbar talking about men having biological clocks and freezing sperm? After my stream on freezing eggs, I think that question I think some people had that question. Why is Dr. Dunbar talking about freezing eggs? Well, this is a science and technology channel, and all of these fall under science and technology. And as a YouTube content creator, your job, your business is to create content. Whether you're thinking about freezing eggs or freezing sperm yourself, or whether or not you're covering it to cover it. Knowledge for the sake of knowledge, knowledge for knowledge's sake. So there we are. I just wanted to put that disclaimer out there. These are things that are being they may not they may not be discussed in your circle, but they are being discussed in certain circles. So there we are. I just wanted to put that disclaimer out there. This isn't easy, and there are people who are always looking at you. There are people who are always looking at you with the side eye for why you're doing this and what you're talking about. So here we are. This is the STEM topic, and let's jump in. All right. If you're watching, please consider subscribing. I sometimes I feel like YouTube. Okay, again, YouTube is a sweet science, just like boxing. And I've heard that YouTube suppresses subscribership and views on certain channels. I wonder sometimes if they're doing that here with this channel. I ran a little experiment a couple of weeks ago. I won't say what it was, but I wonder if that's happening here. So if you're watching and you're new, please sub. And if you're one of my regular subscribers, please share this out and help me grow this channel. Science topics are not easy. Okay. Now that that's out of the way, if you want to make a donation during this stream, my Cash App and PayPal are there. This is part one of a triple header. I'm doing something on my sports channel tomorrow, and I'm doing something on my original channel on Sunday. Man of Tomorrow says something interesting. He says productivity is the real biological clock. Interesting. Interesting. Maybe we could talk about that one day, Man of Tomorrow, and unpack that. T Riddler, thank you for stopping through. He says, good morning, Dr. Dunbar. Very interested in this convo. Yeah, this is going to be an interesting one. Where did this one come from? And I'm going to try to keep the stream nice and concise. Well, number one, where did the stream come from? So you guys know that in at least in the YouTube cycle, there was discussion. Well, it's always there discussion about freezing eggs. We know that that is a concern for women who uh, have been diagnosed with cancer. I have a coworker, well, a former coworker, who's still a dear friend, and she was diagnosed with breast cancer. And so this is a procedure that's considered in those instances because you don't want the eggs being subjected to chemotherapy because once there's DNA damage, all kinds of things can happen, and we're going to come back to that. But also in today's modern era, where both genders are educated and who are pursuing, for the most part, white collar careers. Okay, family formation, reproduction, that's in many instances that's an afterthought. And also, there's the question of finding a quote unquote suitable partner. So many women are pondering and considering freezing eggs. Number one, so they can launch their careers or whatever endeavor they want to launch. And then there's a concern about finding a suitable partner. I'm not addressing the social aspects of that now. That's a deep rabbit hole in itself. You guys can talk about that amongst yourselves, but that there was a science element in that. That's what I'm trying to say. So that's why I decided to cover that, because this is the STEM channel. So I shared that video in there's a Facebook group called the Counselor's Corner. David Lorenzo Glover, shout out to him. He covers relationships and social issues there, many of which dealing with the Black community. I shared it over there, and Christine, I'm gonna give Christine some shine. She said, "Well, hold on, wait a minute. Men have to concern themselves with freezing eggs too. It's not just a thing that women do." And I said, "Okay, here we go. Here we go with trying to level the playing field." And so Christine shared the article that I'm going to share with you all. And I said, well, maybe there's a there. So shout out to Christine for calling this to my attention. This is a STEM and a science story as well. Before I jump into the article, we're going to do a brief review of reproductive biology 101, just so that we know, just so that we're kind of in our science mindsets here. Doug says, okay, so a quick disclaimer: the thoughts of the chat don't necessarily reflect the thoughts of the host. There are viewers who watch there are viewers who watch these things, and they see all kinds of things are said in the chat. I have no control over what people say there. And they say, well, it's your chat, it's your channel. You kind of you're kind of endorsing what they say in the chat. So disclaimer there for the uninitiated. All right. With that being said, I'm going to read Doug's comment. Doug says, considering it's been 20%, I'm sorry, let me slow down. Considering it's been a 20% decrease in testosterone and a decrease by 1% every year, plus the pseudo estrogen in many of plastic hygiene products, soaps, detergents, etc., that's actually a great idea. Doug is talking about freezing sperm. But that, you know what, Doug? One question I'm thinking about that strategy is an egg doesn't have to swim, right? The egg sits there and floats down the fallopian tube into the uterus. And they say the drops of life come from the man. Okay. And being a scientist myself and having done experiments at one point, you can store things in a -80 freezer for a number of years. You could store cells, you could store viruses in a -80 freezer. But how long can you maintain them? How long are they good if you store them? Can you store, are they good after 6 months? Are they good after a year? Are they good after 2 years? Are they good after 3 years? But as we'll describe, as this article will describe, men continuously produce sperm. It's not a finite number. As long as he's taking care of himself and he's not ingesting estrogens. So in theory, a man could freeze down sperm every year. I'm just thinking off the top of my head here. Okay, a quick recap. He smashed that like button if you haven't. Meiosis and mitosis. Meiosis and mitosis. These are some of the earliest concepts you learn in biology 101. So for your gametes, For your sperm cells and your egg cells, I'm skipping over the somatic cells. For the gametes, from the mother and the father, each of those, for humans, each of those have 23 chromosomes. Okay. And when sperm and egg join, that number is restored to 46. And that zygote becomes an embryo, and that keeps dividing and differentiating, and then you have a human developing in the womb of the woman. Okay. So, but there are different sexual systems in on both sides of the gender line. Men have testes, which produce the sperm, right? Those that testicular development and maintenance is in large part driven by testosterone. And then for females, women, whatever, I don't know what's safe. I don't know I don't know what the safe term to refer to women as today is. She, her, hers. I don't know, but she has two ovaries, and once a month, an egg is released from those ovaries or one of the ovaries. That egg floats down the fallopian tube into the uterus, and if it's not fertilized, it will pass out through her vagina during at the termination of her menstrual cycle. Of course, there's bleeding because that the surface of the uterus that bleeds off. Okay, but if that egg is fertilized, it attaches to the wall of the uterus so that the baby can uh, receive the nutrients it needs, and so that it can feed and grow and develop. So that's just a quick run through of biology 101 and reproductive biology 101. Gametes have 23 chromosomes. When sperm and egg join, that number is restored to 46. Men and women have two different sets of sexual organs, both of which are um, mediated by different sex hormones or different ratios of sex hormones. I thought that I had the structure of testosterone in my library of pictures, but I don't. So we're gonna pull it up really, really quickly so we can see what it is, because testosterone is very, very germane to this subject. And falling off of testosterone is implicated in a man's natural loss of reproductive fitness as he ages. So this is the structure of testosterone. Pharmacologists and toxicologists, we concern ourselves with structures, chemical structures. All right, that's the structure of testosterone. That is actually a cholesterol derivative. So your body, you can ingest cholesterol, but your body can also make cholesterol. And for and that cholesterol is a precursor to our androgens: testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, and so on, et cetera, et cetera. So this is going to come up in this discussion. Okay, so let me jump into this piece. It's not a long piece, but it says a lot, and it I did a quick. This piece is 7 years old. Okay, there have been recent pieces since then, right? Which kind of corroborate what's in this. And then the Men's Health website from 2006, it kind of says the same thing. So this is an older piece, but I didn't see something that said that this piece is wrong. I think there's still a lot of indecision on men's biological clocks, and there's still not a consensus on it. That's what I'm trying to say. This is 7 years old, but there's still not a lot of consensus on this. Okay, I want to jump in. T. Riddler says that's a good point. He says maybe one day we can dive into the topic of men taking synthetic testosterone to supplement organic lust. Yeah, so there are hormonal therapies on both sides of the gender line. Okay. So this piece is entitled Why Why Men Should Also Worry About Waiting Too Long to Have Kids. So there are a lot of pieces to this. Part of this is the science, part of this is the social messaging. And that's going to come up in this piece. But when Christine, I'm not telling you her last name, so you don't know who Christine is, but whenever it seems like today, whenever we're talking about the genders, I'll just say this: there's a need to make everything equal. Okay. It seems like there's a need to, or there's an effort to say, okay, well, men have to worry about this too. Men have to worry about this as well. It's not just women. But then if you want to get a little more specific, then the question is, are they the same? Are we the same? So in this particular instance, even if men have a biological clock, are the two instances the same, quote unquote? And I'm gonna tie up with that question. All right. Hello, Chaos Rain. Thank you for stopping through. All right. This was written by Ann Swanson. This is from October 27th, 2015. So again, this is an older piece, but if you do a Google search for and it pulls up some of the modern pieces, there will be agreement with what's in here. All right. And also, for the record, I'm not telling anyone what they should do, what they should or should not do. People watch YouTube content and they say, well, you're telling people to do this, you're telling people to do that. No, I'm not telling anyone what to do. I'm just presenting the information, I'm just presenting the science. All right. As a woman goes from her 20s to her 30s to her 40s without having children, she's likely to hear more and more people warn her about the risk in waiting to get pregnant. There are generally well meaning comments from friends, relatives, even bosses. There are the tearful or fearful advice about the danger of waiting too long. I'm sorry. There are the tearful or fearful there are the tearful or fearful advice columns about the danger of waiting too long. There are the pop culture references, Mindy Kaling's ticking clock, Bridget Jones talking about her sell-by date, or Ally McBeal hallucinating the dancing baby. There are news stories about companies offering egg freezing so women can focus on their careers rather than their biological egg timers. I never watched any of those shows, by the way, so I don't know what this is talking about. I never had an interest in watching Ally McBeal or uh, the other ones. And what and what do men hear about having kids as they grow older? Beyond maybe a parent wishing for a grandchild, usually not that much at all. You might assume that biology explains why women face so much pressure to have kids as they age, but men don't. After 35, the thinking goes, it gets harder for women to get pregnant, and if she does conceive, there's a greater risk the baby will have health problems. According to that thinking, men are mostly untouched by this process often able to father kids until a ripe old age. And we've seen that. We've seen older men be able to do that. I don't know if those particular men, we often think of celebrities. I don't know if those men had some special treatment that they used to still be able to reproduce. So that's an unknown. Or if they were just able to do it. I don't know. Doug says, I wish I wasn't working. There's so much I can say on this topic. There's so much impacting men's reproductive health in this era. You know what, Doug? That's a good point. I know one thing that's impacting, well, one thing that's changing men's physiology is arguably the technology and arguably our industry is going away. I did a stream a couple of weeks ago about whether or not men are getting physically weaker. And there was data quoted in the study I focused on saying that men are getting physically weaker. So there is something happening in this modern technological society, in addition to the environmental factors that you pointed out earlier. Okay, let me continue. D. Scott, thank you for showing up. Except it turns out this really isn't true. Researchers are increasingly arguing that men have a biological clock too, even if most people don't hear it ticking. Research has shown that age affects a man's ability to have a child in a similar way to a woman's, though the timeline isn't the same. It's harder for older men to father children, and their offspring are more likely to have health problems too. In fact, new research suggests that many problematic genetic conditions may be more closely linked to the age of the father than the mother. But few people today seem to be aware of how a man's age can affect a pregnancy and the health of the child. The missing knowledge could be useful for a young couple thinking about when to have kids or a childless older couple feeling the pressure of aging. It could be a strong reason for many couples to rethink their plans about career and family, and for many people to re examine their ideas about work, gender, and their health. Okay, this is a good place to stop and hydrate. How biological clocks started ticking in the first place. Both men and women in the United States today are having kids at an older age than they ever have before. The number of children born to men and women in their teens and 20s has been steadily declining, while more and more kids are born to parents in their 30s and 40s, as the data below from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention show. These trends have a strong link with economic class, education, and race. The more educated a woman or a man is, the more likely he is, the more likely he or she is to have children later. White, non Hispanic women are also likely to have children at an older age than Black and Hispanic mothers. So it's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting there that she once again linked both men and women in education and waiting. That's interesting. So let me minimize this a little bit. So I was looking at this data yesterday. This data is showing, okay, so as a scientist, you want to look at the y-axis, that's your independent variable, and then your x-axis. No, Your x-axis is typically your independent variable, so here it's time. Your y-axis is your dependent variable, so that's dependent upon the independent variable. So what this data is showing us is that from the 1970s to the at this time the mid 2010s, the the rates of motherhood in specific age groups shifted. So here's the 25 to 29 age group that declined. Okay, starting in the late 1970s. The same is true for the 20 to 24 age group. So younger women started waiting to have children. Okay. And then you could see the 30 to 34 group that started trending upwards. And you could see the 35 to 39 age group that started trending upwards. The 18 to 19 age group that trended downwards. And the older age group, the 45 to 49, they stayed the same, but you wouldn't have expected them to really be reproducing much in the first place. Now, the 40 to 44, if you look at this, that group started trending upwards a little bit as well. So it's also important to, in this instance, ask what were the social and political drivers of that may have impacted that. I think that's an important discussion. Uh, that's an important consideration to have as well. Uh-oh, Ray Alexander has entered the building. Good morning, Ray Alexander. Spawn the Programmer says, Doug brought up some good points. Testosterone also drops with men not taking action and taking risks in life. Exercise is also good in maintaining high levels. Right. So, what environmental changes are we experiencing? Well, there's shop is going away. There's not as much encouragement to go into the blue collar trades. White collar education has been encouraged for most people, and a lot of us are in front of computers a lot of the time. And I heard that kids don't even go out and play as much anymore, and they don't invigorate themselves, particularly young boys and young men. They don't. It's not the same as it was 20 years ago. Super Trish says another factor often overlooking this is the usage of exogenous hormones and how they can adversely impact fertility, secondary to negative feedback mechanisms. Okay, that is the negative feedback loop. That's maybe I'll touch on that afterwards. Maybe I'll touch on that afterwards. Okay, let me keep going here. Yet the trend toward having kids later in life seems to be putting far more stress on women than men. According to a poll by Pew Research, by the Pew Research Center, 51% of women with children under age 18 said being a working mother makes it harder to advance in a job or career, while only 16% of working fathers felt a similar impediment. That's more than double. Okay. A lot of women are postponing childbirths until they are 30. But if they can't get pregnant at 30, they start panicking, says Liberty Barnes, a sociologist who studies medicine and gender. They have this very short window and they feel this pressure, whereas I don't think men are feeling any pressure. This dilemma between career and children is what gave rise to the idea of the ticking female biological clock as we know it. When the term biological clock first surfaced in the 1950s, it referred to cyclical rhythms in the human body, like patterns of sleeping and activity, says Jenna Haley, a PhD candidate at Yale, who is studying the history of reproductive technologies. In the decades after World War II, most Americans were getting married and having kids in their late teens and 20s. But as birth control became widely available and women entered the workforce in greater numbers in the 1970s, the phrase biological clock began to be used to describe a new conundrum for society: the waning reproductive possibilities for older women who had postponed childbirth to focus on their careers. Healy says the first reference she has found in the media to a woman's biological clock was the column in the Washington Post in 1978, in which columnist Richard Cohen discusses the anxiety of several career women who he has folded together into one composite woman. Sometimes the composite woman is married, and sometimes she is not. Sometimes, horribly, there is no man in the horizon. What there is always, though, is a feeling the clock is ticking, the column says. The idea of a woman's biological clock quickly spread through popular culture, popping up in cosmopolitan articles and Kathy cartoons. By the early 80s, it's a very widespread cultural expression, Healy says. In 1982, an influential study in the New England Journal of Medicine warned that a woman's ability to have a baby dropped off after the age of 30. The later study suggested the age could be higher. In 2011, the American Society for Reproductive Medicine even funded a controversial ad campaign to remind people that women in their 20s and early 30s are most likely to conceive. Today, the term is commonly used to refer to women's reproductive aging, but the idea of a biological clock for men is less well accepted. While various studies over the past century have shown links between advanced paternal age and reproductive difficulties, it's only in the last decade that some people have begun to argue that the concept of a biological clock ought to apply to men too. One of the main people to popularize the idea is Harry Fish, the New York based doctor of reproductive medicine who wrote a book called The Male Biological Clock in 2005, which describes how male fertility and testosterone levels tend to decline as a man ages and what can be done about it. Fish says a lot of people found the idea that men even have a biological clock to be deeply offensive. I took so much crap for writing that book. It was unbelievable, he said. Holy cow. When it first came out, a lot of people were upset that I was debunking the machismo image of men as they age. Yet Fish and others say the science is clear. As they age, both women and men experience declining fertility, declining hormone levels, and increasing risk of health complications for the child, the very combination that most people think of when they talk about a ticking biological clock. Okay, so this next section is entitled The Science of the Male Biological Clock. I'm going to take a quick look at the chat to see who all is here, to see if anyone is still here. Yeah, folks are still here. Guys, thank you for being here. Guys, this link is here in case in case you want a copy for yourself. You can do a quick Google search to find more articles on this. Okay. Studies indicate that a man's age can affect his fertility in three main ways. The older the father, the harder it may be for a couple to conceive a baby. Older fathers are also more likely to see pregnancies result in miscarriages, and the older age of the father can potentially trigger health problems in a child, too. Unlike women who were born with a finite number of eggs, men continue to produce sperm throughout their life, and some can father children into their 60s and beyond, an age where women's clocks have totally stopped ticking. Okay, so there, that gets back to, are we the same? So no, we're not the same. And I'll just stop there. We're not the same. So when one on one side, the reproductive tract stops altogether, and this is telling us that on the other side, on the man side, it keeps going, but there are risk factors, but they're not the same. All right, I'll read that again. Unlike women who are born with a finite number of eggs, men continue to produce sperm throughout their life, and some can father children into their 60s and beyond, an age where women's clocks have totally stopped clicking, not clicking, ticking, an age where women's clocks have totally stopped ticking. George Lucas, Steve Martin, and Rod Stewart all famously fathered children in their late 60s. But for most men, testosterone declines as they age, which can lead to decreased libido and erectile dysfunction. And as they get older, men also see a decline in the quantity and genetic quality of sperm. So it would be interesting to know if George Lucas, Steve Martin, Rod Stewart, Jerry Seinfeld, if they had some sort of hormonal therapy. I think Jesse Jackson had an accident. If you recall, the great Reverend Jesse Jackson had an accident outside of his marriage. He was above 50 at that time. Did Jesse have some sort of hormonal treatment at that time? Or was he just lucky or unlucky? The late Alan Roger Curry, he had his son when he was 56. I mean, there's no way to know unless we talk to his wife, his widow, if he was using some sort of hormonal therapy. But as a scientist, I'd be curious to know if these men who were older, if they were taking some sort of hormonal treatment or if they were just able to conceive at that age. The aging male, and we're almost done, gentlemen. The aging male, at least from a reproductive perspective, is not as good when he's older as when he's younger, says Alexander Pastusak, an assistant professor of urology at the Baylor College of Medicine in Houston and a specialist in male fertility and reproductive problems. These changes mirror similar changes in women, with a notable difference. Most seem to occur a few years later in men and happen more gradually. There's a lot of disagreement about when exactly in a man's and a woman's life these changes occur. Various studies and experts cite different ages and time periods, but many argue that for women, fertility declines gradually in the mid to late 30s and then sharply in the 40s. For men, the change appears to happen more in their 40s and 50s. One study of 2,000 couples in France found that while women's reproductive capacity tends to decline around 35, men experience a similar, though more gradual, decline after the age of 40. Several studies suggest that men over 35 are twice as likely to be infertile as those younger than 25. Another study of about 2,000 couples in the United States, I'm sorry, in the United Kingdom, showed that after controlling for a woman's age and other factors, men were 40, men who were 45 and older took 5 times longer to conceive than those who were 25 and younger. The charts below from the UK study in the journal Fertility and Sterility show that show how the advancing age of women and men tend to lengthen the amount of time it takes to get pregnant. For the women and men in their 20s and early 30s, that study examined nearly 80% got pregnant within a year, but those rates fell to only 36% for women over 40 and only 25% for men over 50. Okay. Guys, this link again is below in the description box in case you want to keep a copy for yourselves. If you guys want to make a donation to the channel, that information is here. Please like the stream. Also, please share the content out to help with my my reach. That would be very helpful. And again, I'm not telling people what they should do. I'm not advising people on what they should or should not do. I'm just talking about the science. All right. Now, this is interesting. We're almost at the end. Some doctors argue against the term the male biological clock, mostly because they don't like the metaphor. Larry Lipschultz, a doctor of urology at Baylor College of Medicine in Houston, says the term conveys a false sense of finality. There's just no consensus on when men should be considered of an advanced age reproductively, he says. But the concept is certainly one that we should embrace, in that men are not immune to the effects of aging on their reproductive system. For men, some of these changes are treatable or avoidable. Men who are overweight are far more likely to experience low testosterone levels, and male fertility problems are often linked with other health problems, including cancer, hypertension, heart disease, or kidney disease, Pastuszak says. There's also growing evidence that what a man eats, drinks, and smokes, what pesticides or industrial chemicals he is exposed to, and even how much stress he experiences in the months leading up to conception can influence the health of his sperm and thus potentially the health of the baby. That's worth a second read. There's also growing evidence that what a man eats, drinks, and smokes, what pesticides or industrial chemicals he is exposed to, and even how much stress he experiences in the months leading up to conception can influence the health of his sperm and thus potentially the health of the baby. But other changes in a man's reproductive health are just an unavoidable consequence of the march of time. Numerous studies now show that a genetic quality of a man's sperm degrades as he ages, which may lead to infertility, miscarriages, and an increased risk of autism, schizophrenia, and certain cancers for the child. This is why the American Society for Reproductive Medicine now recommends that sperm donors ideally be less than 40 years of age to minimize the potential hazards of aging. The key is that while women are born with a finite number of eggs, men form new sperm throughout their lives, with the existing sperm replicating its DNA and then splitting into two over and over again. That might seem like a fountain of youth for men, but it's actually more like a game of telephone. Each time the process is repeated, there's the chance that the DNA will change a little bit. For this reason, the number of genetic mutations in a man's sperm appear to increase gradually and steadily with age. According to Icelandic researcher Kari Stephenson, one of the authors of a 2012 study on the subject, the result is that there is a much larger number of genetic conditions that are associated with the age of the father, including early onset cancers, schizophrenia, and autism, than the age of the mother. Compared with a 20-year-old father, a 40-year-old father brings twice the number of new mutations to a child and is 2 to 3 times more likely to conceive a child that will eventually develop schizophrenia or autism, Stephenson says. What the research shows no connection between the age of the mother and these mutations. To me, this was a remarkable observation because when I was in medical school, we were always warned about the age of the mother, Stephenson says. You could argue that in our work, there is buried a little bit of redemption for the old mother that we were always criticizing for the risk of having children, because what is truly dangerous is the high age of the father. Many experts say these findings should be interpreted with some caution because scientists still don't really understand how genetic mutations ultimately result in specific conditions like schizophrenia and autism. For example, some mutations in the sperm's genes can actually be repaired by the egg before being passed on to the child. And others, including Stephenson, say these findings shouldn't dissuade older couples who want to have a child from doing so, because the chance of having a child with a genetic disorder is still very low. The study suggests that the chance of having a child with these disorders might double from around 1% to 2% with a man's older age. Not a terribly large increase in risk when you look at the context of everything that we have to go through from the time that we are conceived until we die, Stephenson says. If Stephenson argues the findings are substantial enough to influence public health and how people think about paternal age more broadly for society, this is very important. Everyone, please smash that like button if you haven't. That helps with the engagement. Also, subscribe if you haven't. And please share this out. Help me expand my reach. So I'm going to make some final conclusions, or maybe I'll start right now. What I'm seeing is as men age, there is the potential for more mutations in his sperm, but his ability to produce sperm doesn't necessarily stop. Whereas we know that women do go through menopause. Okay. So I'm not saying the mutations aren't significant. I'm just saying that the way I'm reading this, the men's reproductive tract doesn't stop altogether. It's just different. Okay. This, I promise, is the ending. The second sex, at least in reproduction. The disparity between how we think about men's and women's fertility isn't just a matter of science. It also speaks volumes about our assumptions about reproduction, families, and gender. One reason is the doctors and scientists have put much more time and money into studying women's reproductive health than men's. Barnes says that by her calculation in 2013, there were 5 reproductive endocrinologists who mostly treat female patients for every one urologist specializing in male fertility in the United States. According to Lipschultz, male infertility research is easily a decade behind female infertility research in the United States. Now that's significant. What I just gleaned from that is there have been more resources put into the female side of the reproductive equation, which is interesting. I wonder why why that would be. Why have more resources been invested in women's reproductive health than men's? That's significant. I may return to that in the future. This is partially because women's role in reproduction, the cycle of menstruation, pregnancy, and delivery, is more immediately obvious than the role that men play. It's also because for much of human history, giving birth was an incredibly dangerous activity. In the United States, about 18 women today die in pregnancy or childbirth for every 100,000 live births, down from about 600 women per 100,000 live births a century ago. But it's also in part because of deeply entrenched cultural attitudes toward reproduction. Barnes, the sociologist of medicine and gender, argues that there has been an assumption that fertility, pregnancy, and childbirth are women's issues, both in popular imagination and in the medical community. I'm going to read this subtext. While women are educated to think about their role in reproduction, men generally are not. Until recently, doctors recommended that women go to the gynecologist every year, providing ample opportunities for a woman to talk about reproduction with a doctor. Many men, in contrast, don't even know what the male version of a gynecologist is. I believe it would be a urologist. Lipschultz says the idea that paternal age affects fertility and pregnancy has not yet filtered out into clinical practice, and that he has never seen a man referred to discuss advanced paternal age. Yet any woman who will be over the age of 35 at the time of delivery will have her medical file stamped with the term advanced maternal age, and most likely will undergo genetic screening for fetal abnormalities. A man's age, in contrast, is almost never considered. Hmm. Okay, let me finish this up. Barnes followed dozens of couples for her book, Conceiving Masculinity, Male Infertility, Medicine, and Identity. Says the couples, says that couples seeking treatment in fertility will often look to the woman first, undergoing treatments like in vitro fertilization that focus on the woman's body, even though male fertility treatments, such as checking for swollen veins or infections, may be simpler and less invasive. As a sociologist, I would say, of course, this is linked to gender beliefs. So, this final section is called Lessons from the Ticking Clock. Experts say that these findings about paternal age and fertility shouldn't dissuade older couples who want to have a child from trying to do so. However, they could they could be a consideration for young people who are just thinking about when they want to have families. If you're 40 and you're trying to have a child, you do the best you can, says Fish, the author of the book on the male biological clock. But I have a daughter who is 22. My recommendation to my kids is, why don't you try to have a family early? And that's for both men and women. But I certainly would love it if my kids had kids before they're 30. And that's from a fertility doctor's point of view. Alexei Kondrashov, a genetic a geneticist at the University of Michigan, go blue, agrees. He says the findings about older men and genetic mutations are not enough to discourage older parents from trying to have a child. However, they might be enough to encourage young men to freeze their sperm in case they want to have kids later in life. 18-year-olds don't think about these things, but if I was 18 years old and capable of thinking of things like that, I would think about it carefully. As the idea of the paternal biological clock becomes more widespread, it could also be an important guiding principle for how our society functions more broadly. For example, encouraging more doctors to talk to men about their fertility and turning stressful workplaces into family friendly ones. It could also be an argument for supportive policies like paid family leave or childcare that might help men and women have kids at a younger age, says Renee Alamalang, a sociologist at Yale University who studies medicine and gender. If we really start to think of reproductive responsibility as something that is not just applicable to women, I think it raises a whole host of questions about other contentious debates we have in this country, Alma Ling says. All right. Well, guys, this link is below in the description box in case you all want a copy for yourselves. There's a lot here. There's a lot here. So this kind of touched upon the science of it. No, it's not often talked about whether or not a man's ability to reproduce or how significantly age affects a man's ability to reproduce. It's not talked about a lot. It's not talked about often. And it's something to think about. But I think you also have to go back to environment and what things caused the shift in age for both genders. What things caused this, and was that a good thing or was that a bad thing? Were those drivers, were those changes in the environment? What role did what role did they play in this shift? Because we know things were different 50 years ago. And what will this all look like going forward into the future? And all of this is this does this undergird the need for artificial womb technology? Something like that. Is that is that why? So it is 12:30. Speaking of physical fitness, I want to get out and take care of my physical fitness. Guys, if you haven't, please smash that like button. Thank you for the engagement. Once again, I'm going to drop the link to this piece in case you guys want to read it yourselves. So my conclusion from this is that we know our bodies change over the years, and as we progress, what I glean from this is that there is the increased risk for mutations on the male side, but there isn't. If a male takes good care of himself and he exercises, and if he's vigilant about his fitness, it doesn't look like there's a hard stop on the male side. That, you know what, that might offend somebody if I say that, a hard stop. But it doesn't. What I glean from this, when I'm reading from this, is that men don't stop producing sperm as they get older. Mutations may go up, there may be other complications, but it doesn't stop altogether. And I think I'll stop there, because you never know when you're going to offend somebody. Today, you never know when you're going to offend somebody, and that right there, saying a hard stop, that's a term we use at the workplace. I have a hard stop, I have to go to another meeting. But in this context, you never know if that's going to offend somebody. So in summary, why did I cover this? Well, it was time. I had time to do it, and someone brought this to my attention, and someone said that men also need to think about freezing their sperm as they get older after I did my live stream on women freezing their eggs. Now, what I will say is that you don't hear a lot about, well, I guess if more messaging like this gets disseminated, maybe you'll hear more men with a sense of urgency wanting to do this. But I haven't really heard. Maybe there is a pool of men somewhere talking about, hey, I need to freeze my eggs. I need to freeze my eggs. I'm sorry, not eggs, sperm. I need to freeze my sperm. I need to freeze my sperm. I need to freeze my sperm. But most of what you hear is the women talking about freezing their eggs. So you don't. I haven't heard a lot about this, but maybe we'll hear more in the future. So someone called this to my attention, so I thought it would be cool to do the other side of it. But again, on this channel, I talk about science and technology related topics. My next guest, I think we're going to talk about nuclear power. So for those tuning in and saying, why is he talking about this? Why is Dr. Dunbar talking about this? What's he up to? We just talk science over here. So this falls under that umbrella. Toya, thank you for dropping your like. I appreciate it. That's very much appreciated. She says, have a good weekend. Thank you. You too. Everyone, I don't have time to run through all the comments here. I thank you for your comments. I thank you for your participation. I'm going to end with my usual. And there may be follow-ups to this. There are a lot of moving parts with this thing. Please consider signing up for my my newsletter. I've already started crafting the July edition. Wow, the year is almost it's more than halfway over. Can you guys believe that? We're technically in the second half of the year now. This is my well, let me see what Doug says. Doug always has insightful comments. Doug says, based off my personal research on men's reproductive health, I believe we will see this as a viable solution in the next decade as more men are impacted by endocrine disruption. You know, Doug, you just introduced I'm not going to say what I do and where my 9 to 5 is, but the term endocrine disruption, that's a concern with our current world. So what chemicals are being put out into the world, what chemicals are in the soil, what chemicals are in our drinking water from wastes, from production of commercial products, what things are out there floating around that we're ingesting, what things are out there that are impacting our endocrine systems. That's a concern. And the reality is a lot of us don't know. When drugs are manufactured at chemical plants where pesticides are manufactured, what things are going into the soil and into the water that are harming us. I'm thinking about one of the episodes of Star Trek: The Next Generation, because that happened in one of those episodes, but it was I think it was one of their it was their planetary shield. This race had made a planetary shield around their planet, and it was destroying their ability to reproduce. All right, my newsletter. I need to go to the gym. Yeah, this is right here. Thank you to those of you who have signed up. There's a 2 paragraph greeting, and there's a subscription button at the bottom. You just sign up there in that field, and you're a part of my little group. And I won't give your information away to a third party. All right, everyone. If you're new, please consider subscribing. If YouTube allows you to subscribe, please like, share, and subscribe. If you want to donate something to the channel, that information is below in the description box. I'll share it one more time. And everyone, enjoy your weekend. Get some rest, have some fun, unwind, whatever that means to you. And as always, remember that your attitude determines your altitude. Always try to do your best. Take care, and I'll talk to you the next time. And as the great Dr. Willie Soon says, if you mess with science, you end up messing with me. I was gonna, well, I've been saying that recently, but I'm gonna prepare some fun stuff for this channel, some drops, and some fun stuff for this channel, so you guys know what I'm talking about. Um, 'Cause I do watch a lot of science content. I do watch a lot of talks about the climate debate, about energy, about a lot of things. I do watch a lot of science content here on this channel. So, all right, everyone, I will talk to you the next time. Thank you for tuning in. Take care. Bye bye.